welcome to everybody joining us today or watching this session back on the recording. Welcome to the 2024 Masterclass for the Public Affairs Awards. My name is Louise Watham and I'm the Senior Public Affairs and Policy Manager here at the PRCA. And I'm delighted to be hosting today's session where we're joined by an expert panel who not only have the expertise in judging the Public Affairs Awards, but also in entering them as well. We are joined by Emily Firmer of Hanbury Strategy and Stephen Pomeroy of Cavendish Consulting, formerly BECG Group. We're also due to be joined by Leon Cook from Atticus Comms, so he'll be joining us in a little bit. So the webinar today is really to get some top tips in best practice for entering the awards, and in terms of how today will run, I've prepared a few questions to ask just to get the conversation going a little bit, and I'll run through those. But if you do have questions that you have yourselves, please just pop them in the chat, and I think it's probably best if we go through the questions we have prepared and then we'll look at the questions that are in the chat at the end, if that's okay. Okay, so without further ado, I will start with the first question. So Emily, are you happy to take the first question?
Go for it.
Okay. So based on your experience, what key elements would you say should be included in an entry for an award to make it award-winning?
Thanks, Louise. So yeah, I've been judging the awards. I think this will be my third or fourth year this time round, and it is hard, right? I completely understand when you're applying, you don't know who else is going for it too. Judges are given kind of a random selection of a couple of entries to a couple of categories to judge. So the process we go through, if it's helpful, is we're given a link to an online form, and then we go through, we have the category criteria which we use to judge, and then we see the entries. So for me, what I look for is clearly demonstrating the results, so the clear journey from what you set out to achieve and how you achieve that. Articulating clearly is super important. If you think the judges are looking at multiple different entries, and if when you read it through a couple of times, you're still not really sure what was set out to achieve or what was achieved, then that can kind of limit your, I think, kind of good feeling towards that entry. And it will be an obvious one, and this is hard to articulate, and maybe we'll come on to this later in the discussion, but showing creativity and really standing out and being different, I think do go a long way when you're seeing multiple different awards.
Thank you. Stephen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, a couple of things just to add. I think what's really important now is that you see an innovative approach, and there's an enormous amount of innovation now that we have in our industry, and being able to demonstrate that and how it enhances the income. The outcome is very important. I think it's something is read in a way where you see it being very authentic, and you can see that compassion, that commitment that comes out in an entry. And for me, one of the things which is always important is the strength and the structure of the narrative. It's a bit like starting a book. If it's boring, you don't want to turn over the next page and you want to put it down. And you do find with entries that some are just incredibly boring to read, and others you can see where the time has gone into it to provide a really strong storytelling narrative, which you actually get excited about as well. As you can see the effort that's actually gone into the reading of it. And finally, outcomes, not outputs. Too often You read everything about outputs, what you did, how you did it, but the outcomes aren't there, and they're vitally important.
Thank you. Just going back to what you said about the kind of importance of storytelling and making it exciting and relevant and compelling. Could you talk about what are the common mistakes you see in the entries? Do you see things that are reoccurring in those entries that you kind of could pinpoint just as a helpful?
Well, a couple of things. Make sure you're following the guidelines. Often you will start reading an entry and it's the guidelines aren't being followed. Avoid putting too much technical detail in there. That can get quite boring, and you have to find ways of visualizing that, and that's where hopefully those who are entering are already creative, are looking at creative visual aspects to make the entry more exciting, and also when you're putting that narrative together, you have to make sure you've got that concrete evidence and that data that backs up the entry. So if you've got a good heading, if you haven't got the data underneath, then you're going to have a problem.
Okay. Emily, anything to add to that, just about common mistakes that you see in entries?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with Stephen. I think when you have a single page or 2 pages as a judge to read, how it looks on that page, if the information is in a strange order, or if you have strange boxes, or if you're wasting some of that page with blank space, I think that those things kind of do factor in, because you have a short time in which to review. Going back to kind of demonstrating results, if you've clearly set out as your aim of a certain campaign was to change government policy on X, and then some of the evidence you have for doing that, for achieving that, is only meeting with a couple of backbenchers, I think that's a kind of obvious thing where you think, oh, that wasn't quite, whilst I'm sure there were some great things that campaign did, I'm not sure that it achieved what it set out to. So do always think back to, are you clearly articulating the purpose of something? And then are you clearly demonstrating that you've done that? Avoid spelling errors. It's the same as when we put in proposals for new business, like give it that level of kind of care and attention. You are representing your business, and you know, silly mistakes, just of course they happen, but get it proofread by as many people as you can. Get a second opinion in your organization before you send it through, because often when you're so close to a subject matter or a campaign, say, you are familiar with it, and so you'll easily slip into technical detail, or you'll easily assume knowledge of somebody reading it. So just take the extra care to, I think, get someone in the team to review it and just sense check it.
Thank you. That's really useful. Just to move on slightly to talk about the categories. I know we've refreshed the categories this year a little bit to try and modernize them a bit, and to make sure that they are applicable for everybody. But could you talk a little bit about entrants you've seen where maybe they, you know, maybe they might have been more successful if they've entered a different category? And do you think the entrants do that a lot? Are people missing out by not thinking about the categories that they might be eligible for? Emily, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's vital to get those categories right, and the best way to do that is for a team to sit down and review the categories in detail, and actually look at the work the consultancy has been doing, and whether or not they feel that they have a winnable entry. And you've got to remember, you don't have to enter. If it's not your year for a particular category, then don't do it. Because you do see in the awards that I've certainly judged, ones where it seems like they've just put it in because they feel they needed to. And if it doesn't stand out, it's not going to go anywhere. And it's really important to be honest with yourself and say, is this campaign a winnable campaign or not? And if it's not, then don't enter and wait until next year. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I'd support that. I think there are two considerations. The first is the work you've done in the given year. Is there a piece of work or a collaboration or an individual or even your team that you feel actually is in a really good position this year, and if we didn't enter, we'd be missing out, and people need to know about this. The other is, you know, if we put the awards in context, you know, spend by any organisation on awards is part of a marketing strategy, and that has benefits for your team, but it also has benefits for your kind of broader PR and marketing. Is the award and the category that you're looking to enter, does that fit with what you're trying to achieve in that year? So, you know, is this the year you really want to focus on your team and celebrate your people? Or is this the year that you want to do a big focus on a certain sector or a certain campaign style? And so actually winning an award in that area, because you could demonstrate success there, will be beneficial to your kind of broader marketing plan in the year. I think those are some considerations when you're looking at the categories, I would say.
Okay, welcome to Leon, who's just joined us. Hi, Leon.
Hi, apologies. I was listening, but I was off camera, so I've been capturing what you've been saying.
No worries, that's all right. Talking about the kind of categories and making sure that people enter in the right category that's for them, and also bearing in mind that we've refreshed the categories, and we have two new categories, Woman of the Year and Trailblazer as well. I just thought I'd move on to the question about trends in public affairs, and just to ask the panelists if there are any specific trends or emerging best practices in the public affairs field that entrants should be considering when they're preparing their submissions. Leon, do you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, sure. So I think, having been a judge for a few years now, I'm seeing an increasing use of data and how it's basically influencing campaigns. So, and the other one would be digital. So, just to revert back to the very first question, you know, things that I don't like to see is where I see, you know, raised awareness. If it's just raising awareness, that's not necessarily an output, and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily award winning. So where there is a demonstrable return on investment in terms of, well, it's gone from, you know, perception audits from 12% to 83%, that's a discernible output. How you've used polling or sampling or focus groups or something like that, how you're using social media. So, you know, I think that most of the entrants will come from communications companies that will probably all now profile themselves as integrated communications, will show that you are indeed integrated. Public affairs is not a standalone thing. Comms is not a standalone thing. It's all part of one external affairs pie. And so where you can actually show that you've approached a campaign or a problem set with that mindset, I think that it shows ingenuity and creativity.
Great, thank you. Stephen, do you see any specific trends or best practices that are emerging in public affairs at the moment?
Yeah, I do agree with what Liam was saying, particularly around evidence of change. I mean, one of the most boring entries you read is when people are just talking about awareness, and you're almost reading a proposal. You know, they did a stakeholder audit, they met a few MPs, They went along to an APPG and they produced a brochure. Well, so what? That isn't a standout entry. What you want to know is what change has been affected and what evidence there is of that change. And increasingly now, you're able to use data. We all collect data, and data and insight will move opinion. Everyone talks about AI, and it'd be interesting to know how AI is being used. We look at it in terms of predictive analysis, where we're able to get a view on opinion that is being articulated in the various social channels. That's becoming important. It's easier to reach stakeholders through social, and that's where you can use your creativity, and the content in terms of the material that's being used it is very important. So if you are able to use video or good visuals, that becomes important in terms of getting a message across. But ultimately, if you submit a campaign which has very clear outcomes where you've affected change in some way, then that is worth considering. But if you're just going to say what you've done, and there aren't any clear outputs, then that isn't going to be such a winnable entry.
Yeah, I would also say on that, to think whether, not everyone has the gift of having a really sexy campaign that they've done this year on a subject that everyone's familiar with, right? We all work on briefs that some people may not find immediately interesting, but actually what is really valuable is seeing those creative campaigns on issues that perhaps had very low level awareness before you started working on it. So don't be afraid to enter if you feel as though, I don't know, alternative proteins isn't that sexy and that's not going to be considered to be a winning campaign. If you have thought creatively, if the activity and the outcomes are innovative and suit what you're trying to achieve, there's no point doing a big social campaign if actually what you're seeking to achieve, you would have no value in actually doing that social campaign. So I think as experts in your field to apply the best campaign that's suited to the client or suited to the subject matter you're working on, and as I say, kind of showing that story from start to finish, and giving us something surprising and interesting is certainly valuable.
That's the role that Stephen was talking about earlier about kind of communicating a compelling narrative, like an actual story to do with the campaign. Just to kind of switch a little bit, to go a little bit back to talk about AI and data. So I suppose AI as a new emerging kind of area, but I was just wondering what role evidence and data can play in evaluating award entries, and just if the panel could give some tips on how entrants should present that data, and kind of what's the best way to do it. Leon, do you want to talk a bit about it? But
yeah, I mean, I don't know whether Stephen or Emily agree. This is all just subjective, but I'm not a big fan of reading a block of prose. So I actually quite like where I see bullet points and it is quantitative. So use numbers, as those are great reference points for how you've actually, as I said earlier, moved the dial from here to there. So I would rather it be broken up some, because the eyes then immediately lock on. Well, I can see that we've managed to achieve 20 million for our client in securing funding from government. Okay, that's going to stand out immediately. Bold that, by the way, as well, because my eyes will lock in on that. Or the number of parliamentarians that have now rally to this banner is X from before, and they all contributed in this debate, and as a result of that, this happened. So there's a little bit of name checking in terms of, you know, the great and the good and how they are now involved in something. If there is a financial figure associated with this campaign for your client, I would say definitely do that, because that's effectively what comms agencies are supposed to achieve. So, but just don't write it in the middle of a sentence that it sits in eight other sentences, because I might miss it. So make it stand out. So make it as visual as humanly possible. The whole point is you get two sides. So use those two sides very wisely and make it pop.
Thanks, Leon. Stephen, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit that visually, if it's compelling, then it gets my attention. And I'm surprised that you still get entries which are just, you know, blocks on a Word document, and it's just like a textbook. And you do, it's something that naturally happens, get drawn to the ones that give you that greater visual impact, and keep it concise. I don't need to know all of the data. I just need to know what's driven the outcome, or what the change has been. That's what's important.
Yeah, I'd agree with Stephen and Leon on all of that. I'm certainly the same, and you know, it's like our clients, short on time, you know, need to kind of have the information that you want to communicate easily accessible, and make it enjoyable to read, because that will go in your favour.
Okay. So another question that I have prepared is just to ask the panelists, what would you consider to be the biggest benefit, either to your organisation on a personal level or to others in entering the awards? What would you see as the biggest benefit to entering the awards?
The biggest benefit, I believe, is the teams coming together, and being able to introspectively reflect on the work that they've done, and the achievement from that work. To me, it is about the team getting involved with the awards, and then being able to celebrate, hopefully, the win. And then from that, as a company, you get the recognition, and also I do believe it helps with motivation, and attracting good talent, because people like to feel that they're part of that company's success.
Want me to go? Oh, sorry, Leon. I was expecting you to.
Ladies first.
You're a recent award winner, Leon. I want to make sure that you can give your personal experience of it. No, I would agree with that. I think in the current economic climate, there's a lot of you know, a lot of pressures that any organisation faces, and we have kind of limited ways of celebrating our teams, and you know, growth is lower as we look towards recession. See this as one part of a marketing strategy, yes, for growth, but also for celebrating your team and giving them an opportunity to kind of have a sense of pride in what they do. It kind of, it's a bit of an antidote to the kind of doom and gloom of the outside world, I think.
Unfortunately, Stephen and Emily have completely stolen my thunder and all my lines on this, but I would repeat what they've just said. I think that, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, you know, always, you know, chasing the next delivery point for a client, but actually stopping standing still for a while to just celebrate what you've just achieved. That's a very important thing. It's certainly good for internal morale. It is these awards are very, very good benchmark for attracting talent, because quite frankly, candidates or people want to work for award-winning agencies. It's your point of differentiation from the market, because you can turn around and say we've just been nominated or we've won X. And then there's one other thing I would say. My favorite thing to read in award submissions are those that have done that on a limited budget, because it really shows creativity and ingenuity. Anyone can spend money and throw it at the wall, but it's actually when you started with something not very much and still managed to actually get it over the line. I think that's very good to see. Big fan of that.
Good. Okay. I have just popped a message in the chat to open up the questions as well, to ask if anybody wants to ask some questions. Before we move on to that, just to ask if the panelists could talk about what, I know Emily, you said that Hanbury don't enter, but so half of the question for you, but what are your biggest learnings from both entering and judging the awards? So Leon, do you want to start as both being a judge over the years and as entering as well and winning?
As in why I do it. Sorry, I was out to lunch there for a second.
What are your biggest learnings from that? What would you say you've taken away from the process?
Well, there's an element of when you see whoever ultimately win something, why they won it or how they won it. So there's the learning from the best. So you're trying to keep up with the rest of the crowd. I think that's probably the most educational bit for me. And I agree also with something Stephen said at the beginning, which was, if you don't think it's absolutely stellar, don't go in for it. So I think it's also a good curtailment of, I have to be seen to be going in for stuff because I'm a PRCA member and I might get shortlisted. You might, but certainly in the more competitive classes, which is campaign of the year or agency of the year, there are going to be quite a number that go in for that. I think there is a grading system that is unfair or actually inappropriate to these award classes, because it's the more difficult ones where you see fewer award entries going into them, where I would say, actually, if you can win one of these, it shows that you have done something genuinely that year quite clever, because there's a reason people don't put in for them, because they're that much more difficult to do. So I think that it's also good for me, certainly as an agency owner, to think about how I can make sure that we do stuff that sits within one of those asset classes. So I get as much out of this as I do just in terms of trying to, give a bit of time and review stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've seen that as well with the categories as well. There's not always an equal spread of entrants, is there, with some of the categories as well. So it's, I suppose we did talk about that a little bit as well before, just making sure that people enter the right categories as well, which is easier said than done, I think. Emily, would you have some information on kind of what your biggest learnings are from judging the awards?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I've as I said earlier, I think this is my 3rd or 4th year, and I've really enjoyed seeing the amazing work that happens in our industry. It is a real celebration of what we do. And, as Leon said, we can all get stuck in kind of day to day. What am I doing to deliver for my client, or what is the kind of next thing on my to-do list? And this provides an opportunity to step back and celebrate the industry. And I think it's as important as some of the more serious stuff around the code and making sure that we're being ethical in our industry, and that the public have a good perception of our industry. I think this sits alongside that as incredibly important, that the PRCA puts on these awards, and that we're able to kind of celebrate our industry and our profession.
Yeah. I think it's one of the, I personally really love the awards, because they're unique and that we get to celebrate and also hear about things that you wouldn't have heard about before, wins in our areas and why we do what we do. Stephen, do you want to
Yeah, in terms of entering the wards, I think what's great about it is it does give you that opportunity to encourage the team to celebrate success, but also it has helped with identifying areas of growth for the company, because we talk about the awards sometimes we don't enter, and I've looked at those thinking, well, you know, why haven't we got a good enough campaign here? We should have, and that helps with looking at areas of the business you want to grow. In terms of the consultancy of the year, which, you know, most, if not all, members, you know, look to achieve. What's great about that is you're involving all the different teams within your business, HR, finance, the account teams, and they're all making that contribution. And again, giving you opportunities to look at where you're really shining. But also, I think what's important is to look at the challenges you've overcome, because that sort of transparency is really authentic. And if I see a challenge which a company is overcome in whatever way, it all happened, if you remember, during COVID, most of the sort of Consultancy of the Year awards really talking about how they adapted their business and evolved because of the changes we had there. That can be rewarding again for you to recognize what you have been able to achieve. And in terms of being a judge, it is great to see the quality of campaigns and industry leading work that's being delivered by, you know, a whole host of different companies, and that's rewarding then to be part of the process in judging them.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about storytelling in doing an entry, how to display data, and also we've talked a little bit about making sure that the entrants apply for the right category, and that we've also refreshed those categories and added 2 new ones as well. So what would be the panelists' one last top tip that you'd pass on for entering the awards? And could you think of, you don't have to name the person that won or the organization that won, but what would be kind of a moment that you could think of where you thought, actually, that's really innovative and that's kind of stayed with you? So just one top tip.
That's really hard to give just one. I would say presenting the information as clearly as possible. So everything Leon said on visualizing the data, or pictures, images, as well as text and prose, and making sure there are no mistakes in the writing, because I'm bad writing and proofreading errors are a nightmare. So that's my one top tip.
Thanks.
I would say start early and plan ahead, and have fun.
I like that.
And I concur with what Stephen said. Again, I'm guilty of this. I've left this to the last week previously before, and as a result, you get, you know, what you put in. So if you have enough prep time, my favorite are the awards that have a video, quite frankly, because it's one thing to read it, it's another to be able to be told within 90 seconds exactly what you did. And if that also includes sound bites or feedback, you know, if I think in a public affairs context, from the very officials who say, you know, I was very happy to be involved in this campaign, it was a great campaign, we've changed X as a result. I'm not only hearing it from the person telling me that they did this, I'm hearing it, so to speak, from the horse's mouth. That is very, very compelling. So visual and ideally with third-party validation.
I'm obviously not a judge on the awards, but I've been kind of facilitating the award sessions, and yeah, I agree with you, Leon, about some of the videos that have come in and that we've seen. They've been really you know, lovely to see, and they kind of make you, they really showcase brilliantly what it is. Yeah, so I agree with you on that point. So I've popped a message in the chat if we have any questions for the judges. I can't see any questions yet that have come in. So if people, I will just say that again, if people want to ask a question, then please pop that in the chat. No? No questions coming in? No?
We've done our job.
You've done it brilliantly. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that we've covered all of the areas that we're supposed to cover. Thank you to everybody for taking the time today, and we've recorded the session, so we'll have this up on our YouTube channel as well. So for those people who are watching it on the recording, you can go back and kind of look over the top tips as well and go through those in your own time. So thank you very much for today's session. That was really informative and very useful. And if you are putting together an entry as well, then do get in touch with the PRCA, because we can kind of make sure that you're applying to the right category if you have a question over that, and we can help you with that as well. Okay, so thank you, Emily, Stephen and Leon, yeah, we look forward to speaking with you soon again. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
You enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.